Well, good evening. Welcome to the Town Hall Council meeting of Thursday, May the 28th. And I want to thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out on a beautiful night like this evening. And I want to welcome you to the first of a series of Town Hall meetings we'll be having throughout the term of Council. This one here is going to be on the Englishman Water and River Services Project. And Town Hall meetings should be conducted in an atmosphere of respect and civility, which will ensure that we'll all be heard. The protocol for this meeting is identical to a council meeting. Questions from the audience will be addressed to me as mayor, and councillors will participate by being recognized in a similar fashion, just as we do in council meetings. And I want to point out that Councillor Salter phoned me. She got waylaid by the ferry system and is going to be a little bit late, but she told me that she would definitely be here. Tonight's meeting is also being recorded and will be available for review from the city's website, similar to the archived video of council meetings. When you're asking a question or making a comment at this meeting, feel free to do so. And also, if there's a question that's answered that's highly technical, and nobody can answer that question tonight, we'll simply ask you to record it. We have forms at the back of the room, and you can write the question out, and we'll get back to you in a day or two with the answer. On tonight's topic, I wish to provide a brief background on the ERWS Water Service Project and where we find ourselves at this time. The ERWS project includes a new river water intake supply, new water treatment plant, water distribution system, and an aquifer storage and recovery system. The ERWS is a joint venture agreement between the City of Parksville, the Regional District of Nanaimo, formed to secure a bulk water supply from the Englishman River. To begin with, the request for funding to complete the project was sent to the New Building Canada Fund in October of 2014. The timeline for announcement of the grant awards has been delayed from this past April 2015 to this coming October 2015 due to the number of applicants which has oversubscribed the availability grant program funds. Because of this delay, the ERWS Management Board, fearing this oversubscription would not produce the required grant funding of $24 million, we developed Plan B. Plan B requires less funding and provides for a reduced size water treatment plant with a lifetime of 8 to 10 years before the need to further enlarge the facility to the original planned capacity. Last term's council and ERWS Management Board approved the water treatment plant project to meet the criteria set by the provincial government, specifically public health, and the ERWS Management Board to ensure the most cost-effective, environmentally sensitive, and cost-efficient solution that would be developed. This has been accomplished, and the city will proceed to implement Plan B as soon as the grant funding is announced. A referendum to obtain electoral approval for the borrowing of the remaining funds will likely be held in late this year, late 2015, early 2016. Based on current project costs and funding requirements, and assuming a $6 million grant, water rates are projected to increase by approximately 2.25% annually for 2016 through 2024, which amounts to about an increase of $4.33 for the average residential home. Over the past several years, there have been numerous public open houses, open ERWS Management Board meetings, and newspaper articles describing in detail the rationale for the project. Earlier this month, we published 2 full-page information articles in the PQB News and held 2 open houses, one in Parksville and one in the News Bay, which provided opportunities for residents of the 2 communities to speak with consultants and staff, to ask questions and discuss concerns. In summary, this project will go forward with the full support of the majority of Parksville Council and the ERWS Management Board. As mayor, during the last election, I stated clearly at all candidates' meetings, and when I spoke with citizens one-on-one, my priority is to move forward with the project as recommended by the ERWS Board and approved by past council. I do recognize that not all citizens approve of the project. Some wish to start over, and others wish to look at other alternatives. However, given the exemplary professional work done by staff and highly qualified consultants, it would not be responsible to spend further tax dollars for more study. Having served on the ERWS Management Board for the past 4 years and witnessing firsthand the plethora of reports from industry experts, studies and options, I am convinced there are no other suitable environmental or economic solutions for a better and long-term reliable source of potable water. I'm convinced Plan B is our best alternative. That having been said, I am very interested in hearing what our citizens in Parksville have to say, and I look forward to their comments and concerns. Lastly, there is no substitute for potable water. We must realistically consider the water challenges not only facing our community, but those of our neighbors. We must make decisions before we are faced with future water shortages and stringent public health deadlines. Failure to undertake this work will not be in the best interest of our citizens. We look forward to hearing from you tonight. Please keep this evening's discussion to the ERWS water project, and I would now invite anyone who would like to speak to come forward to the microphone, and for the record, we'd like not only your name, but also your civic address. So once again, welcome, and the microphone is open for anybody who wishes to make a comment, or perhaps have a question that they want to ask.
It's really starting there, and I live at 212 Lodgepole Drive. I'm in total favor of the project, but I just wondered where we're at with DFO and the issues with DFO. That's where the sticking point was the last time I heard.
Thank you. We had a bit of a glitch with DFO at the end of February, beginning of March. I'm pleased to say that staff have met with DFO staff in Vancouver, and we'll have a construction permit sometime late this summer.
Thank you.
Al Pastors, I'm at 211 Lodgepole Drive, across the street in Sherman. We've been told that the ERWS are going to install only one 8 milliliter or megaliter capacity filtration unit to keep the cost down to about $20 million. However, if you only put in an 8 milliliter unit, with the well water that we're taking right now, or are able to take, we're going to end up with less water than we currently get, and yet we've got a problem being short of water. We've also found out that it only costs about $3 million to double your capacity to 16 megaliters. The 16 megaliters are going to see you through to 2024. So instead of looking at another town hall meeting like this about water in 4 or 5 years, why not do it for 20 years and spend $23 million instead of $20 million?
Mike Squire, our chief water operator, I believe answered that question to Ms. Hoffer just the other day.
Well, I'd like to hear
And staff, and basically his answer says that the way we're proceeding, and once we get to the design of the plan, the existing plan, Plan B will be sufficient.
So you're saying that 8 megaliters added on to our well water is going to be sufficient?
For the time being, yes. But I'm not a water expert. That's why, did you get a copy of Mr. Squire's response to Ms. Hoffer?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
Would you like me to read it?
Well, I have it here.
Mm-hmm.
So do you want me to read it, or do you want to read it?
Go ahead.
Okay.
You're the chair.
It says that after completion of the pre-design of the water treatment plant that produced detailed costs, the City of Parksville prepared a financial analysis that reviewed all funding options and revenue sources required to fund this project. The financial review, with the worst case scenario, no grants, determined the community could only afford a water supply system at a cost of around $20 million. Given our financial restraints and the uncertainty of receiving federal provincial grant assistance, a contingency was required, so we directed CH2 and Hill to prepare a reduced scale water treatment phase option which would meet current water demands and be in compliance with island health requirements for $20 million. Eccentrically, an informal value engineering was completed to reduce the water treatment plant to the minimum size in an effort to meet financial requirements. Plan A is still the best option, but unfortunately, without any further financial assistance, we can only afford Plan B. So, Plan B will address the immediate treatment and water unfactored demands needed for the next 8 to 10 years. Without a safety factor, any increase in demands not anticipated by the current data may not be accommodated. However, as you are well aware, certain components of our future water supply system, intake, raw water main, and transmission mains will be built to full capacity. By doing this, we immediately gain additional storage capabilities which will directly benefit and augment water supply capacity to meet peak summer water demands. Certain components of the Plan B future water treatment plant will also be made to phase in additional treatment capacity up to 24 million liters per day in an effort to reduce future capital costs. In other words, we don't want to rebuild the water treatment plant when the time comes to supply 24 million liters per day. Essentially, what we are trying to accomplish is to build a platform of Plan A with a Plan B package membrane water treatment filtration as the first phase. The clear well chlorine contact tank of the treatment plant will also be sized accordingly and will also provide an immediate buffer of additional storage when peak summer demands exceed our firm water filtration and well water supply abilities. Please remember that Plan B is still at the conceptual stage and further details will come with the advancement of the design. Yes, Councillor Beal. Thank you.
Everybody can hear me?
I'll speak into it.
Okay, so thank you. I'd just like to add, not necessarily add, but maybe pull out a few key points out of that response. And the thing is that because the plan involves maximizing the intake at this time and other pipes that will be in place and also storage, what we end up with is passive storage capacity. So although it will be at 8 megaliters per day, and there may be times when, quite likely would be times when we would need more than that, those would be at peak demands. The fact that we have some larger passive storage areas means that we should be able to meet those peak demands. Otherwise, you're right, like it doesn't look like it matches up at all. So I hope that makes some sense.
Further questions? Yes.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Glenda Hunter, and my address is 2378 Devonshire Crescent in Nanuus. And I'm listening to your comments tonight, and I've read the newspaper articles the last couple of weeks about the plans. So I have two questions tonight. The first one is, you've mentioned you're not going to change the plan, that you're going with Plan B. So I'm hoping there might be some expansion to that plan, because I think what's left out of it is recycling of grey water and any talk of black water. The other comment that I have in question is about the article that I read in the newspaper, and that's about how this is going to be of benefit to fish habitat. And it was talking about the fact that it was going to benefit fish, however, it didn't expand on what those benefits were. So my questions are you willing to expand the project to include the recycling of grey water and the possibility of using plants to recycle toxins, because those are happening in many communities in North America? And can you comment on how this is going to benefit the fish habitat?
Well, first of all, the treating grey water is not in the plan at all. That's not part of the project. The second question with regards to fish is that we have negotiated for several years with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and with the new intake location, which will be above the bridge on 19, Fisheries and Oceans are quite content. Since we built the dam and we monitor the river flows, we have exponentially increased not only the species of fish, but the number of fish. Fish are now in the thousands, and the Englishman River at one time was an endangered river, and it's no longer an endangered river. The fish are doing very well. So, and we constantly negotiate and discuss with Fisheries and Oceans with regards to the fish.
So are there specific benefits that you... Are there specific benefits that you could say? That's a very general response. And is there, you're not prepared to expand the plan at all, to include recycling of grey water? Is that your response?
Yeah, there's no plans in this particular project to deal with grey water. The only plan is to deal with getting potable water, getting a long-term supply of potable water.
So is there someone else looking after that? The gray water and the black water?
Well, I'm telling you, I'm on the ARWS board, we're not going to be dealing with gray water with this project.
Okay. Or black water?
No. This project is strictly getting a hold of, on a long-term basis, a reliable source of potable water.
Thank you. I'm
Taking
all
water out
about
of the river,
clean
12
water
months a
for
year.
the citizens. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Doug O'Brien, 1456 Seaway Drive in lovely Hartsville. I've kind of gone into a comment form because that's kind of what I saw in the paper. It says comments only, please, so I'm not going to question form. So I've made it into a series of comments, basically voicing my opinion, which I've kind of turned into bullet points. Basically, the only individuals that have the power to halt this proposed ERWS project are the 7 members of Hartsville City Council. This is an enormous responsibility of which the electorate have entrusted you with. The decision is yours, not staff or consultants' recommendations. It will all be on you, the choice to suspend this project and avoid a sea of debt and higher fees for all residents and business owners of Hartsville. Simply put, the plan proposed by staff is too expensive and comes with an enormous gamble in effectiveness for a population of less than 16,000. We know the value of water. We realize that we must create a solution for reliable, pristine, and abundant water. The regional plan started with inclusion by Qualicum Beach and French Creek, as well as Parksville and Nanus. Due to the extreme cost estimates, both Qualicum Beach and French Creek bailed out since they realized it was exceeding any chance of affordability. At no time did the ERWS board go back to the consultants and say, this is coming in too expensive and we need to rethink this project using different methods within a smaller budget. There was no suggestion to consultants to provide a plan with a total budget cap of, just say 10 million or whatever. And then that's when the out of control escalator started. Qualicum Beach withdrawing from the ERWS proposal should have been a game changer. Alert bells and warning lights should have been activated. Mayor Westbrook was quoted in the paper saying it was the best decision of his term in office. The province and Island Health should have been contacted immediately, advising the parameters had now changed. Island Health proposed a water treatment deadline since they wanted to ensure that Oceanside region had a guaranteed safe source of potable water. However, nobody does their best work with a deadline gun pointed at you. I believe at this stage, both Island Health and the province would agree that a better solution at this time is to prepare a strategic plan for the next 50 years for safe and adequate potable water. The new plan should also include not just Parksville and Nanus Fairwinds, but also Qualicum Beach, French Creek, San Corral, Coombs, and Arrington. All of these areas are blessed with the very same Mount Arrowsmith watershed, and therefore should be entitled to capitalize on a superior geographic location. DFO would also be thrilled to be part of a master plan that would enable capture of excess water stormwater to be directed and backfed into the many fish-bearing streams and creeks in the area during the summer drought months, ensuring the success of their enhancement projects. With DFO on board, it would provide access to federal funds to assist with construction costs. The province would be more considerate of providing grant funding, providing adequate, safe, potable water to a much larger population area, which will continue to expand. We don't need to reinvent the wheel and pursue non-guaranteed proposals. CRD Water in Victoria has a similar geographic location as the Arrowsmith watershed, and they are the envy of many regions in Canada, with a system of reservoir storage of pristine rainwater serving over 250,000 population. Mayor Lefebvre commented at the open house meeting last week that there was no way that Island Timberlands would give up or sell any of their land to the ERWS. Actually, we met with Island Timberlands in the last 3 weeks, and the opposite is quite true. In fact, they felt the down reservoir gravity approach from the Arrowsmith range was actually more logical. A discussion of mutual benefit of both parties should take place. At the ERWS meeting in November 2014, the staff and consultants were supposed to provide options for cost-saving alternatives as requested by the previous Parksville Council. The response at that meeting was somewhat insulting to Council's request. The alternatives, I was at the meeting, they consisted of Plan A, which was the original plan. Plan B was a scaled down version, which we're proposing now. And Plan C, I believe, didn't meet VHA guidelines. There was no attempt at that time to provide the ERWS Board Council any other real alternatives. It was just the same plan, just scaled down, tweaked and tweeted. No real discussion among all parties, including the taxpayers, proposing all possible options has taken place. I've been to every meeting that has been advertised. The eventual proposal was hatched behind closed doors, and successions of transparency are ill-conceived. Since the ERWS open houses in the past never included a full range of possibilities, all the different boards with that. Here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. It never had that. It was just like, here's what we've come up with, folks. So basically it was, here's the plan, we've considered all options, so you can ask questions, not make the answers, but this is the direction we are going to go. Thank you for your comments. In a recent newspaper article, info sheets the ERW advises that other options were considered and dismissed. Throughout the pages of documents and reports from the ERWS website, I cannot locate any documents showing any suggestion of alternatives that were truly investigated in a spreadsheet fashion. I asked Mike Squire about the possibility of using Cameron Lake as an additional source of water. Mike got back to me. He advised that way back in the past, that Qualicum Beach had requested a water license to use water from Little Qualicum River, which was denied by the province at that time. A lot of water has passed under the bridge since that time, and I do mean that literally. As the ERWS in the last 2 years contacted the province to consider the request that Cameron Lake be part of an improved ERWS system. In the Oceanside Star article on March 10, 2015, Councillor Barry Avis of Qualicum Beach says the town has backup potential access to Cameron Lake, contrary to what Mr. Squire had just told me. I'm perplexed. Barry Avis apparently thinks there's a backup that Qualicum use in case things don't work out in their favor with their existing water. Aquifer storage recovery estimated cost from the ERW website shows totals of $5 million. 1.5 feasibility study million and 3.5 for hard costs from the Associated Engineering report. However, page 16 of the Low and Hydrology Consulting report shows an estimated cost of $4.95 million plus cost of resizing permanent pipelines from Claudette Road to Englishman River intake, which will be considerably higher. And then the cost of the ASR injection wellfield property plus all treatment and operating costs easily total over $7 million. And yet on March 19th, in the Oceanside Star, Mike Squire advised that compared to his cost analysis study, an above-ground reservoir would be 10 times more costly than ASR. Really? The ASR cost of $7 million times 10? As an above-ground reservoir would therefore be $70 million? Seriously? Anyways, why is it on the ERWS 2010-2014 actual cost report of April 2015, Table 2, Partsville allocation for ASR, I'm abbreviating, Aquifer Storage and Recovery. Why is the Partsville allocation for ASR at 50% and RDN Table 3 of the same ARS at 50% also? Why does Partsville allocation equal 50%? Whereby last week at the open house meeting, a Parksville senior staff member advised that in all likelihood, no water from the ASR site will be pumped back to Parksville since it would be used primarily for Manu's fairways. Why is Parksville paying 50% of the allocation if the ARS purpose is to supply Manu's fairways? Really? The ERWS spreadsheet, April 15, 2015, Table 2, Partsville allocation of ASR to date 2014 at $1,137,535. And Table 3 shows RDN portion of $399,675. What happened to 50-50? It says right on the previous tables, the allocation 50% Parksville, 50% RDN. And yet here Parksville has already paid to 2014, which is the closest records we have, $1.1 million. The RDN portion for Fairwinds is $399. Doesn't look like 50% to my math. It should be 100% RDN, since on April 23rd, in the Parksville Qualicum Beach News, Mike Squire stated, Costs associated with distribution systems benefiting one partner will be borne solely by the benefiting partner. I would suggest that that benefiting partner would be News Fairwinds in this particular case. However, Parksville's got a very large lump already put up for it, and is considered to do so for the future as well. After for storage and recovery. Yes, I've read the reports, references, and excerpts from the book by the ASR guru, David Pine, as well as the LHC reports of this lowland hydraulic. I also researched the areas where we have been advised in the past where ASR works. Everywhere, every meeting I've gone to, they say, but ASR works, ASR works. And I says, I don't get it. It doesn't. You know, I think it's great. We're looking outside the box. And so I said, where's the, well, you know, there's one in Canada, there's some down in the States. So I looked online, found the book by David Pine and his consulting firm, and I looked, and yes, in Hamilton, Ontario, has a small portion of the total water uses in an ASR site with somewhat underwhelming results. The other site reference is San Antonio, Texas. I mean, really, do you think that here in Canada, with all the talented engineers that we're blessed with, that ASR isn't being used right across Canada? All Canadian public utilities face the same challenges as we do. They would be all over this if this was such a great idea. The bottom line is that our geography is stacked against ASR success, since we sit on a sand and granular base that has poor confinement structure. An ASR zone needs a large impermeable buffer zone to contain water pumped in during winter storm months and retain that water for 7 to 8 months, with the idea to pump it back out of the ground for use during the summer, low river flow months. Really? And it's going to still be there 7 or 8 months later? 1.5 million spent to date on ASR for feasibility studies and test wells. The results aren't encouraging. I went through the reports. They're dry as ever, but they are there. They're not great. The test wells have now been eliminated except for Claudette Road, which is a possibility. And it's even not a great choice. The LHC group advises it should work. It should. But in all of the reports, I do not see any guarantee. As a past purchasing agent, I would insist on a written guarantee backed by the necessary insurance before I spend one more taxpayer dollar. It's simple. I don't want a should on the bottom of the contract. Note that both Associated Engineering and CH2M Hill, which by the Associated Engineering's reports were exemplary. They did amazing work, fabulous work. I didn't get to read enough of CH2M Hills. I'm sure they're the same. Anyways, they are not involved with the ASR proposal. They're standing back from that and letting that be handled by another consulting group. This is a gamble not worth the risk. Since all or most of the ASR water is to be directed at the News Fairwinds, what happens if the ASR fails during the drought months? The stored water has dissipated and more water has to be drawn from the Englishman River during the summer months from our new intake, which is going to upset DFO and all the dead little fishies. However, ERWS is committed to supply water to the News and all the shiny new homes on the Fairwind site. So we got to come up with water somewhere. And if it's not in the ground in that ASR storage, someone's not going to be happy. I submit the following. Effective immediately, the ERWS is discontinued. The AWS, the Aerosmith Water Service, will resurface as a public utility with a mandate to provide safe, adequate, potable water, which is approved by all Canadian island health standards, to those areas on the downward southeast slope, the ocean side. The Qualicum, Sanfarel, I already mentioned, Arrington, Coombs, they all should benefit from the fact that we have this Aerosmith water shed reserve, which is pristine water waiting up there to be tapped into. The public utility would include on its board staff, elected officials, island health, and members of the public from all oceanside communities. It needs to be a public board. We need to have input from other people. We need to have it spread. This way, we're not only spreading the joy, but we're spreading the pain. We're actually taking the money and actually spreading it around all the surrounding communities, which deserve to have pristine water, just like Parksville and the Neuse Fairlands. And they shouldn't have to be forced to buy in afterwards. Actually, they should be part of it right from the very start. We have to look at the big global picture here. Of immediate urgency is to meet with Island Health with the appropriate provincial government liaison to explain our new strategic proposal and to remove the deadline directive from Island Health. Obtain cost estimate proposals from suitable engineering firms following the basic suggestions from like Trevor Wicks and others, utilizing excess stormwater collection, lakes, reservoirs up in the Aerosmith Reserve, stormwater collection going through Island Timberland properties, looking at the Marshall and Robotham Lake system, Cameron Lake storage as well as investigating possible hydro generation benefits. We have one sentence. I have one sentence.
Because we've got other people who want.
I have one sentence. Remember, only you members of Parksville Council have the ability to regain control of our water. I do appreciate you taking a hard look at this, and I thank you for actually giving us the opportunity to present our own opinions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you.
Rhonda Murdoch, 215 Chestnut Street, Parksville. As several of you on council know, my interest in water, it's been for a very long time, and maybe some of you were on the watershed tours that we did back in year 2000, and some of you were on council when I did a presentation in 2005, urging you about the concern of the Englishman River and the water source for Parksville. We taxpayers are always getting the short end of the stick. Number one, forest corporations have made profits on that watershed. They shouldn't have been in the watershed to begin with. Other communities own their watersheds. The riparian zone is absolutely ridiculous. It's more than inadequate. And that's one of the major causes of our problems. So we've made no attention to that. The damage is already done. And I can tell you, I totally agree with everything Mr. O'Brien said. I totally disagree with the current plan. You mentioned how Englishman River was an endangered river. It's us taxpayers. Thank you to us and our money that it is to where it is today. The corporations got the profits, we got the costs. And now we're going to get some more costs. And the way we're spending it, I mean, common sense would tell you, this just isn't right. This isn't the answer. I think that's all. Oh, yes, I've been at some of public meetings, and it takes a lot of courage. Most people are way too intimidated to get up, and I'm telling you, it frightens me too to get up here. And I was hoping way more people so that I wouldn't have to be at the microphone tonight.
Thank you.
No, I'm not finished. I'm trying to do that. No, there's something else I want. Well, yeah, at one of the public meetings, I did ask a question, and I was made to feel actually very foolish. I didn't feel that my question was even answered, so I hope it can be tonight. Because I was involved with Mid-Vancouver Island Habitat Enhancement Society, I was involved in water testing, and I saw some of those results. And I was horrified at some of those results. And I used to have them in my hand, those results. And I guess because I had told people some of the things I knew, I was then asked for the results. And they're in storage someplace right now. And because of what I knew, I took it upon myself to do my own filtration. So what I'd like to know, the plan that you have currently Does it include filtration to remove the polyaromatic hydrocarbons? Does it remove all the heavy metals every time that our vehicles drop all those poisonous toxins on our roadway, and then it rains, and then it goes into the Englishman River, and that's just a little bit of the toxins that are going into our drinking water? Does the filtration in your plan remove those? That's one of my questions. And the other one, what are you going to do about climate change? What are you going to do when there's not enough water to filter in the first place?
Rhonda, the intake location would be above the Highway 19 bridge, so it's there because that would avoid any contamination of our water from vehicles, at least on 19A and on the Orange Ridge, 19A and 19. And your other question was, what was the other question?
So you don't have filtration, you're just saying because it's up there. So
There will be filtration. Certainly, the filtration plant will look after that. Yeah. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Elaine Hofer, 655 Temple Street. And I've been involved with water in Parksville since 1970. And I really do believe that we need a water treatment plant. Having said that, as chair of the Parksville Residents Association water chair, I would like to say we have said from the beginning we need a correct sized one. Plan A was way too big. Plan B, option 4, which is on the table now, has some difficulties with it that I pursued after the last ERWS meeting. Mayor Mark, when you suggested to me that I should keep tune, so I did keep tune. I went out to the news, as Mike Squire says in his letter to me, and got introduced to a lovely little gentleman. I like to call him Jesus Garcia, because that's the way his name looks, but I understand it's Jesus. And what occurred then was, after half an hour of talking to them, was there is a misunderstanding about these drop-in components that I can see. What happened in the ERWS meeting was we were told that we would have to get rid of them in 2024. We could sell them. And that was what concerned me. What Jesus told me was there is like all these little taxis being instead of the bus, but you only build the bus if you're going to build it from scratch. And what he told me in essence is that a 16 mLD filtration, we're only talking about 8, will last us for 20 years. So we wouldn't have to go through this again. That would take us to 2035, and I'll be dead then. In the meantime, we should be doing that from the beginning. For $2 to $3 million more, it only makes sense to do so. And that's what the PRA sent out to council, and that's what Mike Squire answered me. And so I went back and I looked at the tape, or whatever you call it, of the ERWS meeting. And lo and behold, I find that Mike Squire answers different than the engineer who does the filtration. And that's who I was talking to. He said, I said, well, will it cost more in operating costs? He said, no. I said, you can continue using these? He said, of course. I just finished building a 16 MLD in Alberta somewhere, and it's just fine. That's the drop-in components. I would like to say one other thing. I did spend my own money, as Mayor Mark knows, and I went to the ASR convention in Richmond 2 years ago. 3 years ago. I think ASR is fine. It's cheap storage. I don't think it'll work here. And I am stating right now, I would have a difficult time voting on a referendum where it is asking for Parksville to pay 50% or 1% of ASR out in the news. It is not correct. We are a bulk, ERWS is a bulk water supply. It is not about storage in the news. And if that is there, and the way you've got this set up, I believe it is, I could not vote for it. Any comment from any of council why we should be paying 50% of storage in the news?
The RDN is our partner, and there are certain capital costs that we share 50-50. There are other capital costs and other operating costs that they would pay 26% and we would pay 74%. And just to correct the impression that the water is being provided to Fairwinds, it's not being provided to Fairwinds. This is not for the Fairwinds development. The RDN received 26% of our bulk water, and that's it. That water is monitored when it's delivered, and that's what they pay for, and they get no more. But on some of the capital costs, we are sharing at 50-50.
We have not up until now, it's been 74-26, which is what Mr. O'Brien was pointing out. Their bulk water supplier does not store water in one partnership's place. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Number 450 Stanford Avenue. I was reading in the paper here, in the Portland News, water project funding Fairwinds. When I read about the pending sale of Fairwinds and all the encompassing in around the news, I felt need to get some information out there. Like, what is BCIMC and who are they? As Island Health dictating that taxpayers, Parksville and News come up with $24 million plus to pay for the aquifer storage recovery system. Well, bless my soul, it is a pension fund conglomerate. According to my research, one of the major stakeholders in this BCIMC pension fund company is Island Health, and most employees, municipal workers, are another stakeholders. I have nothing against pension funds making money for their contribution. My only problem is my perception of the lack of ethics involved with no total disclosure. If the aquifer project goes ahead, BCIMC can sell off the property, which with guaranteed water supply for 700 more buildings lots, and the good people of the News and Parks will be paying it for the next 20 years. Any comment?
There's absolutely no relationship or relativity. I don't know where that, I wrote to that gentleman and told him to come and see me. There's no pension funds involved at all in any of this for anybody. So I don't know what he's talking about.
Would you put a rhetorical reply back into the paper for me?
I guess I could.
I would appreciate it.
You know, I've invited the individual to come and see me so we can clear it up. I can do that, I suppose. I don't know. If he hasn't contacted me yet, so I don't know if he's here tonight. But
Because it certainly shows a conflict of interest.
okay.
And what was one of the other questions that I had? A referendum on this cost, I think is very, very important. As I spoke to you about it, I think we need to have a referendum the gentleman that spoke here was so bang right on that the cost, what'd you say it was, 2.3% increase for the next 2024? That's a lot of cost, and that's where a referendum would come in handy. I think this should be vetoed.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. My name is Trevor Wicks and I live at 524 Hawthorne Drive, Qualicum Beach. I've been involved with the water situation here for 35 years altogether, but actively involved for 25. A few of the points that people may not understand is about we've heard about climate change and the extraction rates from the river. DFO had established a rate of 1.6 cubic meters per second flow as the minimum for the river to be sufficient for fish. Right now, the gauge is reading 1.3 cubic meters per second. It's already below the requirement for DFO. And the interesting fact is that the gauge is above the current intake. When the intake moves, the intake will be above the gauge. Do we have a good handle on how much water will be left after Parksville has extracted their summer requirements from the river? And what will the low limit be? Because it has already been dropped on special occasions to 1.2 cubic meters. But fish are going to have to struggle to even see any water at the estuary at the rate the water level is going now. Another factor that affects everybody in this area is that, from my understanding, a large proportion of the water that goes through the filter plant has to be backflushed, and the backflushing can occur in the wintertime as much as every 15 minutes. And up to 15% of the total volume of water have to be used to backflush the membranes because of the turbidity. And because the current or the proposed new intake will be below the clay banks, there are thousands of tons of clay there to be filtered out of the water potentially, and that water will be backflushed. The interesting fact is that one of the consultants I spoke to at the meeting last week said that the water will be put into the sanitary sewer. So I guess we are all going to be paying extra costs for the sewage treatment to take. Sorry?
You won't be paying anything, you're living in Qualicum Beach.
I pay for the sewage treatment plant, excuse me.
I take that back.
Thank you. And also, the water in the Englishman River isn't exclusively the domain of the city of Parksville. And when the initial announcement for this meeting was made, it suggested that it would be for Parksville residents only. But by coincidence, again, Qualicum Beach and other residents also pay for the Arrowsmith Dam and the Arrowsmith Water Service. So the water that's behind that dam is being paid for and has been paid for by other communities other than Parksville. So there's another little issue about membrane filtration that I was surprised to read online, is that because the river, the Englishman River, is contaminated in the summertime with a lot of algae, there's a very thick coat of algae in the Englishman River for a large portion of the summer, that membrane filtration has to be cleaned with harsh chemicals, if you like. The list of potential chemicals include hydrochloric or citric acid, caustic, sodium hypochlorite, chlorine gas, and hydrogen peroxide. That's what it said online. We don't know which will be used, but it stands to reason that the filters could become plugged and they have to be cleansed every so often, quite frequently if the water is dirty. I would like to ask Council what they intend to do with the solution that is washed out from these chemicals into our environment. Thank you very much.
My name is Garth Martin. I live at 509 Corfield Street. And I actually have a question. And the question is, what is the amortization period of Plan B? Or more correctly, does that period exceed the period that this plan is reputed to supply us with fresh water? So we're paying for it after. I'm kind of all for that, because I think what would happen is that when growth happens, not if, when, we know what's going to happen. And if we keep these DCCs way down there, you know, we're going to be paying for a lot of things that future people will benefit from. That's okay, I guess. But if you make the amortization period good and long, so in that sense, maybe we should go for the big plan where there's more to amortize. So it'll go further. So we have more opportunity to recover some of the costs for those people who are like grandchildren and great-grandchildren will have to pay for it. Doesn't that sound like an idea? So the question is, what's the amortization period of the loan in either B or A?
I believe Mr. Manson can correct me if I'm wrong, 20 years? 35, 35.
35 years.
35 years. So.
And we're going to pay for something that's amortized over 35 years that will benefit us for 10. Right? Isn't that what you're saying? Yeah, so why not go for it? But let's get maybe Mr. Greer could comment on this. Let's get those DCCs up so that those people pay for it, not us. Thank you.
Good evening, members of council. My name is Alex Kovalak. I live at 115 at Casey Street. Some of you know me, and probably I can see by the grin or the groan that they may not want to hear me. It was always my understanding.
Alec, could you stay close to the microphone, please?
It was always my understanding that the project, a major component of this project, was to provide the excess capacity and stored for use during the months of May to September when we have a tourist season. Now, it seems to me that that portion is either on hold or completely, I don't know. I don't know what status. That's one of the things I'd like to ask. What is the status of the actual testing? Because I think everybody should know that the only means of testing a system like that has to be in situ testing. It cannot be any other way. And I don't know whether the funds, I was told that the funds have been all used up. So what is the status, if you can interrupt to tell me?
As far as I know, Alec, in talking to my squire recently, it's still in the testing phase. They are putting water into the aquifer and they're monitoring how that's reacting in the aquifer. And I don't know if there's a deadline for being able to say it's going to work or it's not going to work, but I know that that's the ultimate goal of the testing that's going on now. I should point out that the K Road tentative or whatever, the K Road, what's the word I'm looking for? When they did it at K Road, it worked, but the aquifer was too small. This is why they looked for one in Claudette. So they're checking it out now. I would imagine, I don't know if there's, Mr. Manson, can you help me on that? Is there a deadline for the, I haven't heard that there's a deadline. I know that the testing is ongoing.
Actually, right now, everything is on hold, waiting for the results of the referendum. So we're not proceeding.
Okay. Yeah, well, we've got the other problem with the referendum. So we were expecting the referendum results last month. We didn't get them, so we're going to wait. We'll probably have to resume more testing when we get the results of the referendum, because we can't do it without the money.
I just want the public to know, and I presume that most of you know, that testing period could exceed a year or two to be complete. It's one of the most experimental phases there is. And if it doesn't work, you don't have a strong system. So what's the backup? But the ASR, according to the former mayor, was the advice, based on the advice of Dr. Payne, or is it Pine? And I have to tell you that the former mayor was very strong in responding to me that this guy wrote the goddamn book, so he knows everything. Well, I can tell you that that same person was stating that he was part of an aquifer recharge system in Kitchener, Ontario, and I was the project manager. It was a recharge of water from the Grand River into a storage system. It was actually a mined out sand gravel pile, and it was completed in 1974. It's still functioning, but it's completely different to this system. What seems to be forgotten in all this is that Dr. Pine did most of his work and research on coral sand. Those of you who know beaches will know that coral sand is completely different from the glaciated material that we have. Our glacial till goes from boulders down to colloidal suspension material. It's completely different. And it's this ASR that I'm particularly objecting to because I think it's a waste of time, and unfortunately somebody got the wrong advice right from the beginning. So I'd like to, I know it's a separate contract, but I'd like to ask this question. Across Canada, it's universal that any engineering project is conducted under what is called an engineer of record. That individual has to be registered in the province of British Columbia, in this case, and he then takes professional responsibility for that project. I know that as elected officials, you tried to take some responsibility, but it's not happening either. But did you know that if you sued an engineer for misconduct or whatever, that he would be responsible? I'd like to know who is the engineer of record on this project, and whether he knows that he is the engineer of record.
Fred, who's the engineer? Is it CNH 2 Hill? CNH 2 Hill is the engineer of record.
Sorry?
CNH 2 Hill is the engineer of record.
No, they're not. Now look, I know this, Mr.
Stay
Mayor.
with the microphone.
Mr. Mayor, I know that they are not. So please,
Leanne, come on up.
they are the engineers for the treatment plant and the intake. But there's a separate contractual relationship between the work that's being done on the ASR. So don't disturb me that way.
I'll get back to the okay.
Good evening.
Excuse me, Blake. Alex, specifically engineer of record for the ASR.
That's right.
Yeah, please.
Good evening, your worship and council. Say thank you very much for having this town hall meeting tonight on this very important topic. My name is Dwayne Round. I live on Martindale Road on the Englishman River, in between the current river intake and the proposed new river intake. And I've lived there for 20 years. I also own the house, the residence at 146 Hickey Avenue, and I pay the water bill for that property. I'd just like to start off by saying, having lived on the Englishman River for 20 years, I've seen the effect on the existing dam, and I'm not sure if everybody's aware, but the city's required to continue releasing a certain amount of water in the summertime, not just for what they take out, but also to support the fish habitat in the river. And I've seen the fish stocks increase dramatically in that river since the water has been released from the dam. It used to be you could almost walk across the river without getting your feet wet. Now, sure, there's not a huge amount, but there's enough to start building those stocks up. And where Shelley Creek runs into the Englishman River on Martindale, they actually counted 550 coho smolts last year. So that is fantastic. And the steelhead are also increasing, which steelhead is one of the most endangered salmon. And those are increasing in the river also. So I just wanted to start off by saying I think the Aerosmith Water Services stewardship on that river has helped get that river off the 10 most endangered list in British Columbia and returned it to a productive river that is increasing in production every year. I also like to say that I support the river intake on the English River. I've heard other suggestions of moving it somewhere else, to reservoirs and Cameron Lake. But if that is done, then what's the requirement on the ERWS to continue releasing the water for the fish? They've got no obligation to continue releasing that water because they'll be getting the water from somewhere else. Then is the river going to start to decline again and get back to where it was 20 years ago when I moved down there? So I don't think it's a good idea to move it. I think the place that the ARWS have chosen for the intake, I think, is a good place. And I must freely admit, at first I had a lot of concerns living below the proposed new intake, and having met with you, Your Worship, and the RDN representatives and Mr. Squire, I've been assured by you that because I'm on a well on Markville, as most of my neighbors are, that our water would be guaranteed, that we would make sure that our water is not affected. And I should also state that I definitely have a lot of concerns with the aquifer storage and recovery because of the concerns with minerals getting into my water supply that is triggered by putting that warm water down into a cold, pristine aquifer. So that was my biggest concern, and I still am somewhat concerned about that to this day. I don't like the idea of the drop-in components because at the May 7th ERWS meeting, I was told that after so many years, those components aren't any good anymore. They can sell them off and recoup a bit of the capital cost, but it's not going to me, a good use of funds. So therefore, I also support Plan A, was spend the money now to guarantee our water for the future and actually reduce our capital costs substantially in the long run. I'd also like to state that I'm also the president of the Oceanside Development and Construction Association, and I've lived here since 1976. I'm a carpenter. I build homes. I may have built several of your homes. And I'd just like to state that 100% of the cost of the intake is going to be paid by development cost charges. 75% of the treatment plant is going to be paid by development cost charges. $11 million, I believe, is the number that will be paid from development cost charges collected from homes that are being built in the community. Some of your homes had development cost charges tacked on to the cost of them. Some of those development cost charges have already been used for the aquifer storage and for the hiring of the CMH2. I believe it's at least a couple million of the DCCs have been used already. There's another, I think, 3 million or 4 million sitting there that's been collected from previous years that'll go towards any water improvements that is caused by future development. Now, if the water treatment plant is only going to treat the water for the existing 12,000 people, then there should be no need to use development cost charges to pay for any of it. Because it's not paying for any new residents, it's paying for the existing residences. So, I like people to re-examine, what plan that you are going for and who's actually paying for it, because you don't hear too many people like me standing out in front of a mic, in front of a crowd like this, and stating, how much the developers and the contractors and the builders are paying towards the infrastructure in our community. When a developer puts in the subdivision, they pay for all that infrastructure. The citizens does not pay for one dime of that. It is turned over at the end of the day to the city, free of charge. So
You know, I kind of get tired of people saying that developers and builders and carpenters like myself that make a decent living to support our families are somehow not good citizens. We are good citizens. And I'll tell you, 90% of the people in the construction industry are mom and pop operations, electricians, plumbers, carpenters like myself that come and fix your homes when they need to be fixed. So I guess at the end of the day, what I'd like to say is how much from the existing 12,000 residences has been collected to go towards this water treatment plant. We all knew this infrastructure was going to be needed. The city's been working on it for 20-some years. So how much in those 20 years have the local citizens paid towards that infrastructure that's sitting in the bank right now?
Mr. Municipal. $5 million.
$5 million. So $5 million by them, 11 by the DCCs. That's $16 million on a $20 million project, and you're hoping to get a $6 million grant. Somehow those numbers just aren't working up. Anyways, that's what I have to say.
Thank you. While the next speaker is getting ready to speak, I just wanted to make a comment about Cameron Lake. I have been told categorically by the provincial government that nobody can take water out of Cameron Lake for your water supply. So, you know, and that's something that we looked at with the RWS. Obviously, why would we look at it? It's up above and it flows down, but we are not allowed to take water out of Cameron Lake. And the main reason for that within the AWS and ERWS is because we have a contract with the provincial government and with Fisheries and Oceans, and that's why we were allowed to build the dam. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, this is Mr. Mayor and the council. This is Herb Welch, 785 Sanderson Road in Parksville. And I guess I'm one of the minorities here. 48 years ago, I came to this town. We had a summer like we're going to have this year, very hot. We had no problem with water. Everything was green, the flowers were beautiful, the vegetables were beautiful. Now, of course, I would also like to address the whole essence of this problem. Turbidity. I know I was born in Vancouver, and at that time maybe 1 million people were living on groundwater. All of a sudden now we have to have these fancy filters. And I mean, I don't know, I guess we need them, but it seems an awful lot of money when we've been living for 100 years without these. Also, if this is true, there is an article in the paper that in the last 10 years, our water rates have gone up 178%. That's a quote from an article in the paper. I don't know whether it's true. So, are we looking for this in the next 10 years? I would imagine so. And now, I had some other questions, but they've been covered by other people. And I feel that if we're going to put more money into the water, that we should get back to giving enough water in this area that we can look after our lawns, our flowers, and not just be contributing more water to growth. And referring to the last speaker, I was an electrician, and I worked in this area. And I didn't depend on building houses and more houses. And we're at a point now We don't have enough water to supply everybody and all this growth, and I think we have to look at it. Thank you.
Charlie Stone, 16. Oh, sorry, you want to respond to that first?
Go ahead.
You don't have any response?
Speak into the microphone. While you're
I'm trying to speak into the microphone. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, I didn't even intend to speak tonight. 624 Island Highway West, encourage the people, you council people up there to answer, maybe give slightly, I feel that the answers tonight maybe have been too concise. And for example, to Stan's question about Fairwinds, maybe that answered one part of it, but you know, I've been listening to this and reading about this for a while, so I understand that if more homes are built, then they pay the development cost charges. I agree with some of the things that other people have said. I'm not trying to stay against that, but so one thing is consider longer answers, you know, from more of you to when we get up and say things. And the other is if you hear something that might not be right, say, just for the benefit of those who might not know as many facts, say it. Like earlier in this meeting, I heard that there was Plan A, B, and C were the only plans that were presented, but I believe there were 4 plans that were presented, and 2 satisfied the needs and 2 didn't. 2, or something like that. I don't even remember the exact details, but if someone knows some details, try to stop false information from coming out of this meeting.
One of the things that's been not talked about in the discussion this evening are some of the regulatory bodies that we're involved with. We have 2 major regulatory bodies. One is a federal body called Fisheries and Oceans, and you'll find out if you read the Fisheries Act that it's a very, very powerful act. And when fisheries says jump, you pretty much have to say how high. And we've had a debate for a long time between public health and Fisheries and Oceans about the intake location. That went on for years because I also sit on the Aerosmith Water Services Board. And we finally convinced Fisheries and Oceans that it wouldn't be a bad idea to consider the human health in looking at the intake location. The other thing about the public health body, which is a provincial body, we were told in no uncertain terms that we had to change the water quality standard because the province is changing its water quality standard. We were given no choice. And we've been negotiating on that basis. The public health officials have been very cooperative. And as a matter of fact, we're going to be asking them for an extension to 2018 because the deadline right now is December 31st, 2016. So they've been very accommodating, and I meet with Dr. Hasselbeck, the face of the public health ministry on a regular basis. And also Dr. Hasselbeck meets with our staff on a regular basis. And you have to remember, people come up to me and say, well, why don't you get them to pay for it? They're making you do it. Well, they're not funding bodies, they're regulatory bodies. They're like the highway patrol guy that stops you on the highway and gives you a ticket for $150 for speeding. You don't negotiate with them, you pay the ticket, or you go to court and you fight it. And so these are kind of the challenges that we're all facing. And dealing with regulatory bodies, one body concerned strictly about the fish, the other body concerned about public health, and you have to bring them both together. And the bottom line in all of this is that we know from the approval we got to build the dam and to have Arrowsmith Lake, when we built that, we signed on for the duration of the existence of that dam that we would look after the fish. And that's not going away, that's going to stay. And so that's why the focus has been to use the water from the dam and to use the river. We want to now use the river 12 months a year. Now we use the river 3.5 months a year for water. And we all know that with climate change that we have low flows in the summertime. But in the wintertime, we get enough water flowing down through that river in 2 days that if we could store it, we'd have enough water for the whole year. So just keep that in mind. Next question, please. Welcome.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Donaldson. I'm 11 Churl Drive. So I had some questions for the information meeting. Why was the financial board missing? In other words, there were display boards that told the history of the ADJOURNMENT and some of the proposals, but there was nothing on finances, and that could have been a great big board which should be displayed even at the community council. And some of those questions are, you know, how much money have we spent to date? Now I'm hearing tonight people can get some of this information off of the website, but when you're having an information meeting and then it's like the finances just aren't there. There's nothing mentioned about what the costs are to date, how much it costs for the aquifer storage you're testing, how much the water filtration plant specifically, how much for this pipeline that's going to run up above, and it runs on the rail line at the back. And so when we can't even, when we come to the information meeting, we don't even get any information about the finances. And it wasn't until I left the meeting, because you're so overwhelmed with all the trying to read everything and understand it, was until when I left that I realized, well, the finances are completely missing. Okay? So another part of this is, you know, when I have been to a meeting or two, and one resident in particular, I think it was Mr. Ryan, wherever you are, and he had been at a previous meeting and asked Mike Squires for costs, financial costs. So then he's back at the next council meeting asking the same question. Mike Squires doesn't have that. And Mike said, well, there'll be a budget meetings at some point. And then the ERWS kicks in, oh, very vaguely, well, we'll have a meeting sometime. So can you understand some of the optics from council to just a regular citizen when we're not being told about the finances, we're not being, you know, from 1 month to another, not being given information. At the information session, it was there that I learned that there was actually an aquifer that was contained. We didn't learn the size. From somebody else said, oh, well, the output was too low. So, you know, you're not really sure. The information you're hearing is something from here, something from there. You join little groups, and actually at this information meeting, there was a concerned citizen who had come, and he had worked on the Okanagan water system there. Like he was actually a maintenance. He managed it, or he was part of the management. And he said the costs of the electricity were just huge. The water filtration, the filters, that the maintenance was just huge. Well, we haven't seen anything about how much this is going to cost. And I did write some of these questions from the meeting. I did. And then there was another expert, I will call an expert because he has a whole, he's retired, he's been all over the world putting in water systems. And he's looking at what our proposal is, and he's saying, shaking his head, and he said, no, there's too many things to do. It's too complicated. It needs to simplify. It needs to, you feed it from gravity and down. And I did ask an engineer, what about placing the intake valve further up the Englishman River above the clay banks? So he said, oh, that would cost too much money. But guess what? The consultant, Jesus, was a very nice fellow, he said, when the clay banks or any erosion or comes down, they have to shut the water intake off. Well, what happens if the clay banks go and it's 1 week, 2 weeks, and you can't shut the system down for water. So that's why if it costs more money, you get up above the clay banks. Like there has never been any cost factor to say what it would cost to bring the intake system up past the clay banks, where there is less turbidity, if you will, and certainly there isn't the guarantee that the clay banks are going to go, because they are. It just depends on which day, time, or storm of the year. And at a council meeting that I was at, and Philip spoke, and he was a concerned citizen and really trying to give alternate solutions and alternate proposals. And he wasn't treated respectfully by a few members of the council. I wrote a letter to the paper in regards to that. And thank you, Leanne Salter, for standing up for the people of Parksville and just thanking them for even showing up. So to sum this up, it really, you hear that you're assuring me, Mayor Lefebvre, that the pension fund is not involved in the news. So that's your information right now, but if it came to light, that's not going to look good. And it looks like a conflict of interest from what you see in the paper with VHOP and if they have a pension, because all of a sudden there's this big rush to get this water system put in, and maybe you are under the gun and it's finally arrived at this, but the optics don't look good. And so that's my point. And I will be voting no. And I'm asked again at the meetings that if you're, what will happen? And so you get the no vote. And then it's 3 months later, VHA is going to dictate it, and you can quote it in the paper, Mayor, that it's just going to go ahead. So why do you have a vote? Why do you have this meeting? If the blinkers are on, your mind is made up, and there's just no room for flexibility. And I really think there needs to be, and thank you to Mr. O'Brien, that's the most detailed information. You really scoured it all.
Financial information, all that information is on the website, and anytime I've been to most, if not all, of the ERWS meetings. When we do budgets, the budgets are fairly detailed. But I like your point. Perhaps in another open house meeting, we could put up a wall and deal with all the finances, because they're all there. Yes. We deal with budgets all the time. Yeah. So that information is there. With regards to the clay banks, I know that staff and the consultant are concerned about that, and they've been looking at it because it is a possibility. Catastrophic events are pretty hard to determine when and if and how that might happen. But I know that they're looking at that in terms of dealing with it. And I'm working on the illogic of being told on the one hand by the community charter that we have to hold a referendum. And then when I turn around and I talk to public health says, if the referendum fails, we're going to make you do it anyway. And that's the conundrum that I'm facing right now. And I'm trying to work my way through that with public health and with the provincial government. I don't have an answer yet.
Okay, thank you.
Just go to court on that.
Councillor Salter? Okay, we can't all talk at the same time. Councillor Salter.
I just wanted to respond as well to that. So first of all, thank you for your questions. As far as I know, as a council member, to date, the number that I have that we've spent is 5.2 million. Okay. So that's the number that I have. I have no idea what the electricity costs are going to be. I have not been given that information either. As far as the original plan, there was an original plan to put that intake way up the river. It was never supposed to be where it's going now. The original plan, way back at the beginning, it was supposed to have been up by the fall. I'm not sure how it ended up that it's found its way closer and closer and closer into Parksville to where it's actually where it's sitting now. There are an awful lot of issues with regard to the location of that intake, and it's not only DFO. And then as far as the NOVO and that issue around if you vote no, you're going to get it anyway. And so when I think that through, it feels to me like taxation without representation. And yet, as a council, our hands really are tied. As a council, our hands are tied. As the residents, your hands are not as tied as ours are. We do have to respond to VHA however they expect us to respond. And so we're beholden to them, but you are not. And they are not an elected body, as we are. But we can't not do what VHA advised us to. However, as a community and as residents, you might have some other alternatives there where you might be able to speak with regard to what VHA are forcing the councils and your other government agencies to do.
So in other words, we could get, I respect that you as a council, you know, your hands do feel tied. So as a group of Parksville residents and news and even Oceanside, period, then perhaps then we would have to bring to bear pressure through the papers, through chain them, if you will, you know, if that's what it would take, for them to have a sober second look.
Yeah, because recognizing where VHA are getting their orders from, and they're getting their orders, and so then they are carrying those out. And as we are a council, we really don't have, we have to follow those recommendations. But you aren't elected.
Okay. Thank you very much. Yeah.
My name is Paul Reitzman from 410 Harnish. I've got two questions, one at the preamble on the history as I see it. And incidentally, I came here in 1972, raised a family, worked here, and I'm almost semi-retired now. The original participants were Qualicum Beach, French Creek, Parksville, and the Neuse. Population 35,000. The RDN, according to the 2011 census, the RDN population graphs and studies identified a 2% increase per year, later revised to 1%. Those numbers, by the way, were also used by Coors & Associates, a well-known engineering firm here in Parksville. The RDN projected that by the year 2050, population would increase from 35,000 to 55,000. It came up to that amount, a low of 47,500 and a high of 63,500. Medium is 55,000. It's an extra 20,000 people. And that translates into approximately 600 people, new people, per year over 35 years in the catchment area of the 4 participants. The RDN's proposed water treatment plant first phase of $37.5 million was primarily based on those figures. The second phase, between 2036 and 2050, was backed with an extra $15 million. The whole project to be $52.5 million. Furthermore, when you go through the consultant's report, the consultant inflated the water consumption requirements for Parksville and the Neuse by 15 and 25% to seemingly justify the numbers called contingency. Then things started to unravel. Qualicum Beach and French Creek pulled out, totally understandable. The reduced catchment base went from 35,000 to 20,000 people. Furthermore, the growth rate, revised to 1%, meant it would take much longer to reach the 55,000 population. At the 1% growth rate, and we know that it has been less per year, based on 20,000 people, it would take well over 100 years to go from 20,000 to 55,000 people. What muddied the waters, pardon the expression, even more, was the fact that no adjustments were made to reflect the pullout of Qualicum Beach and French Creek. Now, we simply need water. We also need to look ahead. Just as we did in the late 80s when I was Parcels Director on the RDN, we had water problem as well, and we built Aerosmith Dam. And incidentally, there were some problems at that time. Why should we spend so much money for people coming to settle here? I was made feel welcome in 1972, and I think we should feel welcome to people when they come even today. The reason I say we need water, I'd just like you to think back to the year 2000. Walkerton, Curitos Peridium. People died. People had to boil their water for a long, long time. Go back to the year 2006, Tofino. Tourists were told, go home. There's not enough water. Boil your water. Look at California, drought. Washington, 3 weeks ago, officially a drought province. Tonight, we heard statistics that the lowest participation in May was in 1946 recorded. We are at half that amount this May. And incidentally, our current cost for readily available potable water is considered to be relatively cheap by all standards. Now, because taxpayers and citizens, as well as DFO requirements, the second sober loop is afforded to more realistically reflect what we need, not what we want. So here we are today, plan number 2B. I think it's a bit more realistic. It also provides for an expansion. It's like when you build a building, the ground floor, but have it well structured so you have capabilities to add a second floor. I have one observation which has been answered, and that, of course, in the past, residents were somewhat appalled because of the reluctance of being able to address a meeting like this. It has happened. I do think your PR, certainly in the past, you should work on it. The two questions I have is, it's not if, it is when other jurisdictions will opt in. I have some financial comfort as I've been told that when that time arises, those who opt in will pay the current rate amortized to the date they're coming in with other financial conditions. However, I would like an answer on the question, in what document is that mentioned and is it ironclad? Secondly, there's going to be a federal election pretty soon, in October. You're going to have people saying, vote for me. You want something, you've got it. You know, whatever you want, you've got it. And then after the election, they say, oh yeah, but that's before the election. We have a provincial representative in Canada. The election's 2 years away. What innovative ways has council talked to those representatives to make sure that we only get our fair share? Thank you.
Thank you. With regards to your first question, when Qualicum Beach and French Creek decided to opt out of the ERWS, they all had their own reasons. Qualicum Beach, we respected that. They've got lots of water in their aquifers. But they did request, and that extent request was acceded to, that if they ever needed water from the ERWS, that they could get back in, and they could rejoin the ERWS. We agreed to that. I was on the AWS when the ERWS was created, and I definitely recall that particular request being made, and it was acceded to. We agreed that they would come back, and you're right, they would come back I think at that time it would have cost Qualicum Beach about $4 million. They opted not to do it. So if they come back in 10 years, it'll be $4 million amortized over that 10-year period, and they would pay whatever the requirement is for that, the amount of water that they would want to have at that time.
That is documented, is it?
I believe so, yes.
Could I, for your indulgence, could I ask you to staff to...
Hold on a second, Paul.
It's in either the AWS or the ERWS.
Yeah, I'll find it, Paul. It's either in the ERWS or the AWS.
With your indulgence, I would like a copy.
Okay, okay.
And then the other one is go after the federal, the provincial hopefuls.
One of the things that I spend my time doing is I remind our MLA where she lives in Parksville, and how important this is to Parksville. So it's pretty much a slam dunk situation. And with regards to our existing member of parliament, there's not too much sway right now because the existing member of parliament, this will change, the riding is going to change, we're going to have new candidates. I've had all of the candidates approach me and tell me that, if I get elected, you'll get your money, so I'm in that position.
There is no better time to get a commitment before an election. Thank you.
Well, I think a lot of this is up to you too, the voting citizens. I mean, make your voices known. I mean, I'm asking for more money, and I would have loved to have had Plan A, but we now know because of the oversubscription, we've been pretty much told we're not going to get that. But I talk to my senior levels of government representatives all the time, and I'm getting knee pads because I'm getting to the point where sometimes I beg. But you're the voters, and I would, when you go to a campaign function for the federal election, be sure to stand up and say, I live in Parksville, and we need to implement the long-term solution for potable water, and we expect you to provide the funding for those projects. So that's in your hands too. I'll keep up my share of the bargain, but I'd like you to do it also.
I would like to address the VHA question. VHA is only the messenger. We are not in compliance right now with national water standards. The standards are national. And when provinces had to upgrade their standards to meet the national standards. And VHA is only the messenger and the guardian of the standards. And we have to meet the standards.
Thank you. Well said.
Pat Powell, 330 Dockwood Street. Thank you, Council and Mayor, for this meeting. What changed between last week and this week? When we were at the public information session last week, we were handed notices that said it was comments only. So what changed? I'm pleased that it changed, but what changed?
We had newspaper articles, and we had the open houses, and we've had others in the past. And basically what we wanted to do tonight, and you're doing a pretty good job, we wanted to listen. Parksville Council talks all the time. We wanted to sit back and listen to what you have to say. That's why it's being recorded. And but of course, I mean, question, it's understood that you can't come to a meeting like this and not have somebody or more than one person saying, I've got a question.
Absolutely. I'm very pleased, and others are very pleased that we're able to ask questions. I had a couple of comments based on last week's notice and a couple of questions. The $24 million that we need, you were quoting earlier, dividing it up, how much it was going to cost each household, and that sounded like a low number. Was that number to pay off the $24 million in X number of years?
The increase would approximately be 2.25% per year. What it means, what it would have meant if we did it in 2016 would have been an increase of about $4.33. But that would go on. That increase will go on at 2.25% a year for 35 years.
So that's borrowing the money.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I might need to change it.
Pardon?
No, the increase goes to 2024.
I'm fully in favor of a municipal water board. I agree completely with Mr. O'Brien. And I had also sent a letter to the editor at the same time. My sister just spoke, who sent a letter to the editor. And I had commented that what we needed was a municipal water board. It's very prevalent across the country. It is complete its neutrality because it has a variety of interests, not just a few interests, and a variety of expertise.
Manitoba said, I've been looking at what Manitoba's doing. They've set up municipal water boards. And I should tell you that as a member of the city's RDN representative, we're starting our strategic planning process probably in the early fall. And when I talk to my fellow mayors, or I talk to the mayor of Nanaimo, he's facing a $70 million water treatment plant and a $70 million sewage treatment plant. When I talk to the mayor of Lansville, they've got water problems. I'm meeting later on in about a month and a half. I'm meeting with the mayor of Port Alberta. We're going to talk about water. So I think as an entity, especially the RDN, we have to look at water for all of us because we're all impacted by water, and that's not going to go away. You know, if you look at Cowichan, if you look at Courtney, they had to boil their water for the last month. In Cowichan last summer, they had big troubles in the Cowichan River with E. coli, I think it was. So yeah, we'll be looking at that, and we'll probably be looking to discuss it with other regional districts also. But it's come to that. I agree.
Good. A few people have mentioned Waterton. Waterton was a private entity. This was not a municipal entity, and therefore it was not a municipal board. Oh, was it completely municipal? Okay, my apologies.
Waterton destroyed the political career of Mr. Mike Harris, so it was probably municipal.
Aquifer storage. I've heard a couple of different pluses and minuses from people tonight saying, yes, it was on, no, it wasn't on. And at the meet, several articles have indicated that when you went to Plan B, aquifer storage was not going to be part of it, was off the table. But at the information session, and what I'm hearing tonight, is that it is on the table, and you're saying that it is still being performed?
Yes.
Is that correct?
When we get to there, when we get to there, yeah. The testing will continue when we get to there.
Fairwinds. Did they pay DCCs, or have their DCCs been delayed?
Director Rogers is here tonight. You're shaking your head, yes?
Yes, the DCC for the news area has been all approved, and the winning new lots and development zone in all of the news areas that are part of the news vacation water services do have development costs associated with all new lots.
Yes, but are the AS lots being constructed, or are they being deferred?
They're paid at the time of subdivision, and so if someone has a lot and they're going to build on it and they're paid, if someone has 30 lots, they have to pay 30 times that.
Thank you. My background is I was a microbiologist, and at a number of the meetings I had asked about the water intake application and never really got a satisfactory answer. Was being told that, well, bacteria, we have to remove the bacteria. That's absolutely true, but bacteria and viruses, parasites, attach to sediment and soil. Therefore, you have to build a larger filtration system to remove sediment,
to remove the bacteria and viruses. If you are not having to remove as much sediment by having an intake that's in clean water or cleaner water, your filtration problems are much less. Both the size of the filtration, but also the maintenance of the filtration systems. And that's why I'm a strong proponent of piping from further up where the water is clearer. And again, like my sister, I haven't heard any costs related to how much would it cost to have a pipe further up.
That was the 10-year negotiation between Public Health and Fisheries and Oceans. Fisheries and Oceans wanted to leave the intake location where it is, because for them that's ideal for the fish. And we wanted to move it further up than where it is now, but we had to come to a meeting of an agreement. So we agreed at least to get it above the 19A bridge to prevent us from having to shut down our water system if we ever got a contamination from a gasoline spill or a chemical spill or any other kind of toxic spill in the water. So that was all part of the negotiation. I mean, we started off with Fisheries and Oceans wanted to leave it where it was. We wanted it much further up, and we got it out. At least we got it out of where it is now, above the bridge, and that's the best we could do.
Isn't there a greater water volume further up for the fish? Because if you're taking the water closer to the entrance, you're reducing the entry point.
Look, I'm sorry, you're raising your hand?
Yeah.
And this is like a council meeting. Okay, Councillor, go ahead, Councillor Salter.
So I just wanted to say, Pat, though, that over the original plan, I guess with the Aerosmith water service, was for that intake to be way further up the river than where it is now, way further up, and it was going to be gravity fed down. That was the original plan. I'm not quite sure what happened that plan changed to where the intake is now. I don't know how that happened, but the original plan was to have it way up the river, way further up than it is, yeah, and further up than the next, where the intake, just over the tracks there. That was not the spot. It was way up where the falls are. That was the original. Above the falls, yeah, was the original plan.
I know I would be interested.
I'll repeat. This was a result of a long-term negotiations, and that's where we were able to saw it off.
Correct. I would be interested in having this kind of this detailed history or information presented to the residents. Along with some information as to reasons why and would it be revisited by DFO. At the public information session last week, I was talking to a number of consultants, and they were very glossy consultants. I asked one of them, are you guys all consultants, schmoozing with the public? And he said, yes. He indicated that they were from CH2M Hill, which I have a problem with because of their indictments in the states for Water Act violations. And one of the questions I asked him, said he was a project design engineer. Is this typical that project design would continue towards final goal, even though something hasn't been accepted by the populace to pay for it? Is this typical?
We have to wait, as I said in my earlier remarks, we have to wait until we find out about the grant, and then we proceed to the design phase. Nothing's going to happen until we get the grant.
Okay, because he said
and then we have to have the referendum to vote on it.
Because he indicated that they were working on the project design.
I don't think the work on the project design has really commenced as of this time, simply because we don't know what the grant money is going to look like, so we can't start paying for things that for money we don't have.
Then I'm not sure what he could have been working on.
Yeah, I'm not having it.
My final point, Island Health mandated this water treatment plant, and RDN approved it at the same time that elected officials everywhere were screaming water shortage. And I don't understand the dichotomy there.
We've known for a long time that the water quality standard had changed and we were going to have to meet that water quality standard. We began working on the concept of how we get around this several years ago. So it's not something that's cropped up. I mean, the issue of finding and hiring the CMH2 Hill, that was done about 4 years ago, and then the serious work really began. At that time, we were working towards a deadline of December 31st, 2016. But as the studies progressed, and sometimes these studies take longer than hydrology, hydrogeology, environmental engineering, they take longer than anticipated because it's a complicated and it's an issue that has to take into consideration a lot of other factors. Like I talked earlier about the fish and all of that, the Englishman River, the flows, and that sort of thing. So it took a longer time, and as the closer we got to, when we got to 2014, we knew we were in trouble, and we finally knew what the cost estimate was going to be. And in those days, we were under the impression that the way that things work with the federal and provincial government was a third. So out of the $37 million, we were expecting to get $24 million. But that's gone to hell in a handbasket in light of the fact that the Build Canada Fund has $500 million for small communities like Parksville and similar sizes. And everybody's into water. I can assure you a lot of these applications have to do with potable water. And so what happened was we found out in late February, early March, when I had a meeting with the senior politicians, they said, by the way, we've got a $500 million budget and we've got $1 billion in requests. So I wouldn't take to the bank that you're going to get the $24 million. So we huddled and we rushed back and started talking about, and even before that, we had discussed alternate plans, Plan B. In Plan B, somebody said earlier there were four different types of Plan B. And we had to firm those up as of the end of, at least the beginning of March. We had to firm those up, and we've met with the ERWS committee. They sat down, and we have what we have today, which is a $24 million plan. Go ahead.
My thought is, which I've just lost.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
My thought, which I just lost.
Welcome to the
it's not the fact that the treatment, we do need to treat the water, but it's the volume, the massive increase in volume that the proposals are calling for. And if it's just to treat our immediate area population and looking at 2% a year growth to provide potable water, we don't need such a massive plan unless Fairwinds is in the picture. And that's the optics to myself and others, is that change the format to why we needed a bigger plant.
What we're doing, for example, with the intake location, is we're building it out to its maximum size. And there's a very simple reason for that. It comes back to fisheries and oceans. The minute you go into the river, you have all kinds of constraints, and you have public health, you have fisheries and oceans, all sorts of bodies wanting to have their say in putting restraints on them. So we don't want to have to go back into the river 10 years down the road or 8 years down the road. We want to build it out, and we'll take whatever capacity we need, and when the time comes, when we get to the maximum capacity, the intake location will be there for the next 30, 35 years.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming and thank you for your comments.
Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is Dennis Concha, 27 Magnolia Drive in Parksville. My first involvement with this water was last week at the civic meeting. I went to get some information as a taxpayer. And one of the questions I had is, well, have you looked at other alternatives? And the answer from the consultants was, well, as you pointed out, Mr. Mayor, this has been kind of pushed on us that the Englishman River is the way to go, and that's the only alternative that we had before us. And you pointed out the catch-22 of the council is in between Ocean Fisheries and the Department of Health. But having said all that, I understand that we have a 10-year supply of water. And so we're only talking of a 10-year further supply of water at a cost of $25 to $40 million, somewhere in there. And I think my perception is that we're all being stampeded into making a decision on this because of health and welfare, the provincial health department, I should say. And Councillor Salter's suggestion that perhaps the group here could exercise some political pressure on the powers that be that they're not in a position to do. It seemed to me like an excellent suggestion, and you seem to have a ready-made group here that's very active and very willing to do this. And at the very outset, Mayor, you mentioned that you did not want to expend further monies on examining alternatives. But I would think that it might be a very good idea to give the ammunition to this group of just doing that and pointing out what other alternatives do we have to piggyback on our existing system, for example, and secure an additional 10 years of supply, and how do those costs compare, both on a projection of capital costs and operating costs for that 10 years on the various alternatives that we might look at. And that to me would seem to be money very well spent, and perhaps you have a lot of that information already. And I'd also like to say that I think it's excellent that the community is looking at a 20-year supply, because nothing can be more important than water. And I'd also like to endorse the comments of that construction gentleman that spoke just before us. I think that construction is very important for any community. It's a cash multiplier. It brings in new businesses. Construction companies make money. All the tradespeople make money. And why should we deny other people wanting to come into this beautiful paradise of ours? But getting back to my main concern is that we don't get stampeded into a decision just for the sake that health is saying we have to meet these standards. They're not supplying a cent of this, as I understand it, and they're not an elected group. So my suggestion would be to give this group of people the ammunition that they may need to look at different alternatives and just see whether they stack up. And perhaps this alternative that you're proposing ends up being the best one, but at least it settles the water and makes everybody fully endorsing whatever decision we come up with.
If I gave you the impression that we're being stampeded, yes and no, and that stampede or that directive forced us into a solution, that's not quite the case. What we did a number of weeks ago, we were asked by the editor. Actually, no, I asked the editor of the newspaper to come and talk to me because we wanted to give him a perspective. And what we did from a visual point of view, the point I'm getting at is the consultant and staff have done innumerable studies This hasn't been just focused on, they looked at all kinds of alternatives. So what we did is we took a boardroom table just to visually give the editor the impact of what's been done and the plethora of different hydrology, hydrogeology, environmental assessments that have been done, looking around at all these different alternatives. So we filled the boardroom table with all these reports. And the boardroom table was a fair size, and the reports were piled that high all over the table. And when he came in, he said, "What's that?" And we said, "That's all of the reports that have been done." So, you know, and those reports have been going on for quite some time. So when people say, "Well, did you look at this or did you look at that?" The reason we have open houses is people can ask those questions. And I'm sure that, 10 times out of 10, because I know I do it, somebody will call me and say, "Hey, did you look at this?" And I'll say, "Well, I don't remember because I've got a great memory, but it's short. But I've been around for all of the reports and all of the studies." I go back to staff or I go back to the consultant and they say, "Yeah, we did that 2 and 3 years ago, and these were the findings." So we've done all that, and I don't feel that I honestly don't feel, to thine own self be true. I don't think that spending more money is the answer on more reports. And I would invite, this is why I want to make it very clear, we're prepared to have more open houses. I would invite anybody in this room who's got specific questions on issues that maybe you thought we hadn't looked at to come back and ask us, because I'm sure we have.
Well, you mentioned the number of year contract that you have on the Englishman River right now. But surely that's a sunken cost, right? Those costs are there no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So I would just urge you to look beyond the sunk costs and say, okay, taking a fresh approach to this, and from a community perspective, not everybody was being at all these meetings and privy to all these different studies that you've had. What are some of the other alternatives over and above the sunk costs that are there anyway? And how do those compare to $40 million or $25 million that we're talking about here? And, perhaps we end up where we are right now. Perhaps it's further up the river, which may be a more viable solution. I don't know. I don't have those answers. I'm just new on the scene here. But it just struck me that I, for one, would like to know what are the alternatives and what are the costs of those. And if enough political pressure has to be exerted on a non-elected entity, so be it. Thank you.
What I do know is that I've asked questions from people that have made suggestions to me, and the consultant has said if you do that, it would be more expensive than what you've got now. So, anyway, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that. The other thing I want to say as well is my feeling is that the community hasn't been as involved as they would like to be because they haven't had the information that they need in order to make this decision. And so the town hall this is a good beginning to start getting that information out there and to ask those questions and for us to go back and find the answers if we don't have them here. But I don't think this is the end. I think this should be the beginning in getting that information to people and in responding to questions and responding to the really good questions that I think were being asked here. And they're valuable, and this is what's going to help everyone make that decision when that referendum comes. And also, as I think people have to be aware of the result of that referendum and the value of that referendum, because it needs to be valued. Otherwise, you're wasting your time coming in to vote for it.
Yes.
Hello, Peter Simkin, also live on Orange Street in Parksville. A comment and a question. I've been here since 1990, excuse me, and we've been going over this water issue since before I arrived here. Like you said, those studies that were filed, even at the last presentation at the community hall, I noticed there was a study that was dated 1982. This has been an issue that's been ongoing. I would like to think at some point in time we're going to have to put faith in our elected officials and the studies that have been done, the however many millions of dollars we spent over the last 30 years of this issue. Is it the best idea? I don't know, probably not. But when we consider the water problems, the climate change, the fact that we are less than, as somebody mentioned earlier, the record for rainfall right now is 8.4 centimeters or millimeters, maybe possibly millimeters. It was set in 1946. At this point today, we're at 4.1. Things aren't going to get any better. We need to move on. Better ideas, I'm sure they will always come out. Yeah, through all the councils and all the people that have lived here, we always have better ideas. At some point in time, we have to bite the bullet and move ahead. And I'm a firm believer that the sooner we do that, the better position we will be when water becomes a lot more critical 5 years, 8 years, 10 years down the road. We need to move. My other question, I have a question regarding the financing. You said that there was a 2.4% increase until
2.25%.
Thank you, till 2024. So obviously that money is going towards this entire project. Now we also have a referendum coming up depending on the funding. So if we get no funding, and the referendum is going to ask for approximately, thank you, I was going to say 20 million. Well, I don't think it would be 25 because if we've got a 2.4% increase for the next 8 or 9 years, that's some amount of money. So we don't need to, referendum will not have to cover the entire cost. So I'm assuming that we have a rough idea. If we have no funding, how much will the referendum be for? 20 million? And if so, whatever figure that might be, we'll say 24 million.
I'm gonna stick my neck out. In the discussions I've had with the senior levels of government, we will get funding because it's water, and it's. Yeah, I think it's somewhere between $6 and $8 million.
Okay, so let's go with that figure. If we have 6 million, then we need to have a referendum for approximately 18 million. So we have a 2.4 ongoing increase.
I'll get Mr. Manson to give you. He's the.
I'm curious how. Excuse me, I'm curious how much more over and above our 2.4% increase is our referendum about to add to our water bills.
Trying to speak loud enough so everybody can hear. Our portion of the first phase is about 17 million.
It's back.
Is it on yet? Okay, our portion is about 17 million. 4.25 million of that we're assuming is grants. 5.5 million is debt. The rest of it is existing reserves, either through surpluses from the water utility fund or existing ECCs. That's our portion.
So the amount for the referendum could be
5.5 million.
So how much? That's obviously going to be amortized over
35 years. The 2.25% increases starting 2016 through 2024 will cover all of the costs of that.
And that will increase the average the average homeowner or home's water bill by how much?
Right now, the average residential utility bill is about $200, $192 and change. 2.25% of that is $4.33 per 2016, and then of course it would be on top of that, so you can do the math over that period.
Not that quickly. I'm sure something there.
2016 is $4.33 annually. That's the increase, and then it would be
so our water bill is going to go up maybe to $250 a year by the end of this.
I haven't done the math.
Yeah,
but it's not a lot.
To me, it doesn't. I guess my point is to me that doesn't seem like a large increase in funding to secure a water source. To me, all these ideas that we keep bringing up, let's try more alternatives, let's look at more ideas. We're going to be spending millions and millions and millions and millions when the actual cost to improve our water system is going to be $4 or $5 a year. That to me doesn't matter. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Lefebvre and Council, for this meeting. My name is Maya Carson at 387 Temple Street, and I am surprised that in all these discussions, earthquakes are never mentioned. We do earthquake preparations, we have all kinds of things, fear-mongering amongst rational issues with earthquakes. How would this prospect affect where the intake of the water is, if it's higher up, it's where the mudslides come down first? How does it affect long-term planning? Should we not use some of the money instead of for planning for future that may be earthquake-driven for sewage treatment, which is closely related to drinking water? There is so much pollution happening here on the West Coast due to sewage, which is not properly treated. And I think those two facts are related and should be addressed at the same time. Thank you.
Yeah, earthquake, how can I, that's what's called a catastrophic event. And when I've asked those questions about catastrophic events, my answer from the specialists and my answer from the provincial government is, if it's a catastrophic event, we'll all be in the same boat and we'll have to react. Some people say if we have a major earthquake that we're supposed to have, the island will split in half. Other people say this, that, or the other thing. I mean, catastrophic events are catastrophic events. I don't know how. Nobody, in other words, I can't answer your question. Anybody I've asked the question of can't answer that question. It's a catastrophic event, and we'll all be, like Nepal and all of that stuff. We'll be up the creek without a paddle. Forgive the play on words. We'll all be in the same boat. We'll need helicopters, and we'll need. I once we have down at our beach at the base of Bay Avenue, we have a sewage treatment pumping station there. And I got concerned one day because there was a report on earthquakes, and I said, my goodness, what would happen if that broke in an earthquake and it devastated the beach, our beautiful beach? And he said, believe me, if we have a catastrophic earthquake, that's going to be the least of your problems.
Yeah.
The short thing is there's no answer. I don't have an answer for you, and I don't think anybody else does. It's a catastrophic event, unfortunately. Let's pray that it doesn't happen.
So, as a concerned citizen, again, I'm very for clean water for everyone. And I'm very concerned tonight. Myself and at least 3 other people came up to this microphone and talked about contaminants and what was going to happen about that and algae, and there weren't any responses to that. So that concerns me a great deal. And then another concern is that you're not linking this to gray water recycling and black water and sewage, and that concerns me a great deal too, because you seem to have a reluctance to explore the benefits and the potential of making a better plan by including those things that are extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you. Another comment on gray water, you're right, gray water should be, we shouldn't be flushing our toilets with potable water. That in my opinion is sinful. And having been to Australia, they use a lot of gray water. They don't use potable water to flush their toilets. But again, coming back to public health, and I'm not picking on public health, but if you want to build a home today and you want to have gray water in your home, it's going to cost you more. Mr. Round, you're shaking your head. But you've got to jump through hoops with public health. Pardon me?
Public health.
Yeah, see, public health is the impediment. But I do know of somebody who got permission to do an experimental house in Nanaimo where they've got gray water, and then they use it for heating. I think they treat their sewer water or something. But that's an exceptional.
And to perhaps it's in one of those reports, like buried in one of those reports, because I do appreciate you've done a great deal of work. Wolverton and Wolverton, two scientists from NASA, have done a great deal of work with that, because if we're going to leave this planet and go to another planet because we've really messed this one up, then we have to figure out how to clean up our waste. And they've certainly done that. There's a great deal of research been done on that. So it is available. Wolverton and Wolverton, it's actually a father and son. So someone should take that name down, because it's about how we keep water clean, because that's what we're talking about, clean water.
Thank you. It's just, you want to say something now, Councillor Salkins? Oh, go ahead. Oh, please. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Recently, this council, most of us attended workshops and everything with newly elected in Courtney, and I had the pleasure of going to one of the workshops that talked about water and plants and grey water, and I do believe, I'm not sure if Mr. Oates or Councillor Oates or Mayor Faith attended that one as well. But we talked a lot about grey water, so I just wanted to about one of the another community that had worked at water filtration and treatment. So we've talked to different people and our consultants and Mike Squire and have looked at other places in BC that have other treatment facilities. So I'm not a technician by any stretch of the imagination, but when they talked about their costs and everything, it was in the $30 million range, and they're looking, and it's been ongoing for about 7 years, I think now, and they'll be replacing some of those membranes and everything, but they use a lot of plants and everything for filtration, and they had it right in their community. So there wasn't that smell, there wasn't that toxicity, and used it to the very high standards of grey water. Didn't have it at black water, didn't have, so it can be done. Yeah, absolutely. So,
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing that. Thank you for bringing that to our attention, Glenda. You know, you're right. People live off the grid all the time. If we just look across the strait at Muscogee Island, people are living off the grid right now. People live in areas very close surrounding us, and they have sewage treatment plants. The water that comes through those plants that comes out the end of it is supposedly potable. So that is not far-fetched, and it's not unreasonably expensive, because private people have sewage treatment plants in their yards rather than using a sewage system. So it's not illegal. You can have a sewage treatment plant, and it's not ridiculously expensive. We do need to be looking further ahead than right here and right now. We do, and we do need to be looking at those possibilities, and perhaps a slightly higher cost, but in the end, well worth it.
Next, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor and Faith Council. My name is Sandy Hurley. I live at 253 Lodgepole in Parksville. And I just wanted Council to know that I very much support Plan B. I think I'm, as a resident of this community, I think that I appreciate that all of the committees and have studied well. There are many reports, and I appreciate that you can keep studying this for many, many years. But we are looking at what's going to be safe water for our community, and I think that this is the direction that we need to go. My other role is president of the Parksville Downtown Business Association, and I am pleased to say that we wrote a letter as a board in support of the direction that you are choosing. So thank you very much.
Paul Drummond, 568 Soriel. I also manage a property in the area. We pay about $304,000 in property tax this coming year, and $105,000 last year in water and sewage. So water is critically important to us and the success of our business. I really want to take my hat off to Mayor and to Council for the work you do. You're not getting huge amounts of money. You can afford multi-million-dollar homes with what you're being paid. So you're doing this from the heart. I also realize that in the few short months that you've been Mayor and a Council, this decision wasn't just made for you. It was previous councils, previous mayors, and a lot of work. So my hat's off to you, and I totally support this decision of where you're going. So thank you for that.
Quick follow-up, that on the financial part of it, are we also considering in this grand scheme the operating costs of this? Are they fairly flexible at this time, the operating costs, or we have that fairly well nailed down?
I'm going to let the CEO answer that. He's the member of the board.
I'm not sure whether this is on or not. Yeah. We have looked at the operating costs. As an accountant, I tend to understate revenues and overstate expenses to be conservative. So we have looked at what the expected operating costs are. They are, until we actually do a detailed design, all we've done at this point is preliminary design, which was required for our DFO applications. As we get further along in the detailed design, the operating costs will be firmed up. But as an accountant, like I say, I'm very conservative. I understate revenues, overstate expenses. So we've taken the high end from the expense point of view in modeling out what we figured the rate increases would have to be.
Thank you.
Robert Shaw, 556 Morrison Avenue. And just to make it clear, my other life is president of the Parksville and District Chamber of Commerce, as well as president of the Parksville Oregon Tourism Association. I would like you to know that we also are in full support of this plan. I think we need to get moving on it. We don't have time to keep looking and looking and looking. I agree with that, and I commend Council for what they've done. So thank you very much.
Well, okay, we've got somebody else. Good.
Good evening. My name is James Cutler. I live in 681 Martindale Road. First, I want to commend you for the form that you provided. It's pretty impressive to sit here this evening and watch and keep giving the opportunity for both sides to speak. I came in here with having a small issue. That's why I wanted to wait for the end to talk, because you're obviously giving some big issue things here. I just learned as part of your plan, I don't know what stage it's at, but there is an access being planned that's going to run behind our houses on Martindale Road. Is that correct?
An access for water access or a road access?
No, trail access.
Trail access.
Along the railway track?
Not to my knowledge.
So for me, I'm just gathering information here too, so can you comment?
If the mic is on, part of the plan is a distribution main from the site of the new treatment plant to the Springwood water facilities. That is being routed along the ENL rail corridor. That's the only thing that I can think of.
Is there a walking trail that's going to be implemented with that as well?
I can answer. Okay. There's two walking trails envisaged by the RDN out of Springwood Park. One will follow the old ENN railway line to Coombs, 7.2 kilometers, and the other one will follow the existing railway line to Lowry's Road, 4.2 kilometers. That's the only trails that I'm aware of, unless Councillor Beal, do you have any other information? I know that's not near Martinvale, but that's the only trails I'm aware of.
I could be wrong about this, but my understanding is that in addition, that the distribution pipe would hopefully, I don't know when exactly, but would hopefully be covered with, some material that would allow for a walking trail on top of this. This would increase trail ability for residents, but also it would mean that we've got eyes on pipes, as in if there was ever some sort of a problem, a leak or whatever, it's nice to have it someplace where people will come across it. But my understanding is that this would be along the E&N railway corridor. So I don't know where,
Yeah,
I don't know
Martindale
where that would go behind somebody's house along Martindale. I don't know.
My property does back right onto that railroad, that has railroad lease, and I think I see many of my neighbors here, and that's probably, they all have our own wells and septic systems, so that is an issue for us because it certainly changes the access from behind our properties. If you're familiar with the area, it is quite secluded. So I think any further discussions in that regard, I just would like to find out when you could be present or to have some sort of input for the people who live on Martindale Road. Because I understand the choice has been made or proposed at this point that this trail or the pipeline would go on the Martindale side rather than the other side. And the lay of the land is that on the other side goes directly uphill, so it would have very, very minimal effect on the properties above there. They never wouldn't even be able to see, and people who were using the trail wouldn't be able to see those properties. For us, because of the lay of the land is downhill, it looks directly, any trail access there would put people effectively looking right back onto our backyard, which doesn't exist now. So it sounds like it's very, very, it's distant and it's an ancillary discussion, but I would like to be involved going forward from here.
Can I suggest that you come and see me and we'll talk to the planning people, because I don't think we're too sure what you're talking, so
Well, means that's all.
find out.
That's all I'm looking for. And
Come by and see me, we'll find out.
Okay.
Okay?
Thanks for your time.
I'm a resident of Martindale Road too, and as a southern one here, and that we want to have it, worked out with better with the city if they're going to have to go on behind our houses. Because all our houses border on railroad tracks.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out to the audience tonight that Mr. Leaders came to see me about 2 weeks ago. He belongs to an organization called the Forefathers of Parksville. And he told me, you better damn well listen to me because, sonny boy, I can fix your wagon. By the way, just as I know it's not related to the ERWS, but Mr. Leaders has got some pictures that we're going to love to look at because there's old pictures of Parksville way back in the 30s and 40s, and so we're going to make use of those. And if we can copy them, we're going to hang them up in the City Hall area. I hear you, Mr. Leaders. Well, as somebody once said, seeing nobody at the mic. First of all, on behalf of council, I want to thank you all very much for coming. I want to thank you all. As I said in my initial remarks, this is going to be the first of town hall meetings. We'll have different topics. There's one coming up in August. We want to talk about the property over bordered by Craig Street and by Jensen, in terms of what the citizens of Parksville have any ideas for that property. And that's definitely a night. There's nobody on this council that's a developer, so that's definitely a night where we're going to want to hear from everybody, and we'll look forward to that. As a result of this meeting, we'll review the video that has been taken this evening, and we'll have a look at it. I know there's some questions that we have to answer, and I think we're probably going to be looking at, given the size of the group, we're probably going to be looking at another open house with more financial information. And I'd like to get an index of all of the studies that were made, so we can have a look at that. And in terms of this gentleman's question here, we can certainly have a look at how many studies were made on what topics and where they were and that sort of thing. So we can look at that process. Once again, thank you very much for coming. We look forward to seeing you again, and I wish everybody a safe drive home. Thank you.